Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudiraye Nashtaprayeshvabhadreshu Nityabhavati Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Nanda Gopakumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha Dhyananjana Shalakaya Chakshuronmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Yuta Padakamalam Shri Guru Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajata Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Ena Durmatihi. Those who are detached maintain themselves honestly by collecting grains left in the harvested field or left on the grain market floor. O rulers, how can I take up the condemned profession of a priest, which gives joy only to the foolish? So, because Vasishtha Rishi took this actually profession of a priest, therefore his sense of discrimination was lost and he over-punished Prishatra. When you read the topics on Varnashram Dharma, there are different occupations given for a Brahmana. Out of that, the lowest occupation given is actually the occupation of a priest. The highest occupation is that the Brahmana should maintain himself simply by collecting the grains which are actually left over in the marketplace. So from the Vedic culture point of view, the occupation of a priest is something is very low for a Brahmana. But from the modern say Kali Yuga point of view, even a Brahmana taking up the position of a priest is superior to working in some multinational company or something like that. But nevertheless, I'll discuss here that so why it is mentioned that a Brahmana as a last option he should accept the position of a priest, because the reason is that when you become dependent on somebody, when you are actually for the sake of say wealth, when you agree to do different say yajnas and this thing on behalf of others, then the dakshina which you take from them, that can actually contaminate your sense of discrimination. So generally we find the Brahma, one has to be little conservative in regards to what we take from others, and we can be more liberal in giving to others. For example, like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says at the end, "Idam te na tapaskaya na bhaktaya kadachana nacha asusrushave Vachyam Nachamam Yobya Suyati. Do not give this knowledge to those who are not austere, those who are not my devotees, etc. But Prabhupada writes in one of the purport that although Krishna has given a very serious condition here about whom this knowledge should be given, but sometimes for the sake of propagating Krishna consciousness, we take the risk of becoming more liberal. We take the risk of being more liberal. So sometimes like Ramanujacharya was very liberal in giving the holy name. Although his Guru Goshtipurna told that you cannot give this mantra unless you test that person the way I tested you. But Ramanujacharya was very liberal in giving the mantra. But there's another story. Once Ramanujacharya was going to Tirupati. On the way to Tirupati, he took milk prasadam at the house of a devotee. And then the devotee, when the Ramanujacharya was coming back from Tirupati, the devotee requested him, please come to my house and have milk prasadam along with your disciples. Ramanujacharya said that, no, I already came to your house. Now it is all right. Like that, Ramanujacharya was reluctant to go. But this disciple was actually requesting repeatedly. Because he was requesting repeatedly, please come again to my house for taking prasadam. And then, because of a repeated request, Ramanujacharya went and took the milk prasadam. And then after taking milk prasadam, then next day he started fasting. So another servant or a disciple of Ramanujacharya asked Ramanujacharya, why are you fasting? So Ramanujacharya said that, yesterday I took milk prasadam at the house of this particular disciple. But this disciple had a sense of false ego, he had a sense of I-ness. I want my guru to take prasadam in my house, or he had a sense of some ego. I could sense that, so therefore I got contaminated because of taking that milk prasadam at his house. Therefore I am fasting. So this story can seem really extreme actually. But what it shows is that how like the great spiritual leaders, the same Ramanujacharya who was so liberal in giving the holy name, but even though it was milk prasadam and given by a devotee, but Ramanujacharya felt that, oh, there is some contamination in his consciousness, so therefore I must fast because I took the prasadam given by him. So generally when it comes to receiving, they are very Brahmanas or the spiritual masters, they are little conservative, highly selective. But in giving, they may be sometimes more liberal. They'll be more liberal. So therefore, in the case of a Brahmana occupation, sometimes like when a person, because of want of money, when he takes up the occupation of a priest and then performs different yajnas to fulfill the desires of the particular yajaman, then and gets dakshina from them, then the Brahmana can become contaminated. His sense of discrimination can get lost. So, like for example, like for a Vaishya, the natural quality of a Vaishya is wanting to earn more money. and that is nothing to be condemned. It is a natural quality. He should just try to supplement that quality by also trying to be more charitable. He doesn't have to suppress the quality of the nature of wanting to earn more money, but he should just supplement it by proportionately being more charitable. The natural quality of a Kshatriya is that is to increase his influence, by conquering more and more territories to expand the kingdom. The natural quality of a Brahmana is that he is never satisfied with his level of knowledge. He wants to learn more and more. There's a beautiful shloka in Niti Shastra, Bhartruhari's Niti Shastra. Be sometime I'll read that. But one part of the Niti Shastra says that a Brahmana becomes destroyed, or a Brahmana gets lost, or his prowess gets lost or destroyed when he does not do Adhyayana regularly, when he does not study regularly. So, a Brahmana's natural quality is to get more and more knowledge, which is a natural quality for a Vaishya. But when Brahmana becomes greedy for money, then he loses sense of discrimination. So therefore, there is importance of a Brahmana or a spiritual leader to maintain independence. So to the extent a person becomes, like you might have read sometimes, whether it's a high court judge, a Supreme Court judge, one of the important point is that they should not be affiliated to any political party. Otherwise, if they are seen that they are affiliated to certain political party or something, then they will give a biased decision, biased judgments. So, in the scriptures, generally it is mentioned that scriptures talk about a poor Brahmana. Many times the poor Brahmanas are talked about. So Brahmana, why they generally Brahmanas are poor? When we read in the different stories in the Shastra, because is it a conscious choice on the part of a Brahmana to remain poor, or is it because of a continuous failure on the part of a Brahmana of being unable to earn more money? So the reason is that it is not because of a repeated failure to earn more money. Most of the time, it is a conscious choice. The Brahmanas remain poor by inspiration. It's an inspired poverty. So the reason is that Brahmanas represent knowledge. And knowledge is a liberating force which frees a living entity from bondage. If a Brahmana were to sell knowledge, then that means knowledge would become purchasable. And if the knowledge can be bought, then a person with money would be greater than the knowledge, because he can purchase the knowledge. Therefore, in order to preserve the purity of the knowledge should not be sold. However, Vyasadeva has mentioned in Kali Yuga, he is mentioned in the Mahabharata that in Kali Yuga, many people, one of the, I think there are 3 or 4 prominent sins in Kali Yuga. He says one of the prominent sins, which is Kali Yuga, is that people will try to sell knowledge. Therefore, a true Brahmana prefers integrity over trading cognizance to a wrong and unqualified audience. Because when you are selling knowledge, then whoever gives money, you will give the knowledge, even though that person may not have the adhikar for the knowledge. For example, if we read in the any Vedic textbook in the Sanatana Dharma, the textbook will mention 4 things: Vishaya, Sambandha, Adhikari, and Prayojana. The subject matter of the book, Sambandha, the relation between the book and the subject matter, and Prayojana, the result of knowing the subject matter, and the Adhikari, for whom it is meant for. So nowhere you will never find that the Adhikari for the knowledge is a person who has money. Adhikari will be always mentioned in regards to a particular quality. Like Bhagavad Gita mentions the Adhikari. Krishna says, who is Adhikari for the Gita knowledge? And Bhagavata mentions Paramo Nirmatsaranam Satam. That is the Adhikari for the knowledge of Bhagavatam. So but if the money is made the criteria, then the purity of the knowledge will get compromised. Therefore, a true Brahmana prefers integrity over trading cognizance to a wrong and unqualified audience. So therefore, to learn any knowledge, to experience that knowledge, and to teach that knowledge, it requires a simplicity of lifestyle. So both artificial poverty and glittering prosperity, they are distractions for learning and teaching. So that is why learning and teaching happens in a natural and humble atmosphere where there are minimal distractions. So therefore, a Brahmana would prefer minimalism to maintain his independence rather than submit to the control of any system. Rather than submit to the control of any system or a power holder or a particular person. So that's what the quality of a Brahmana is, that he is loyal to the principle and not loyal to the people. So when a person, a Brahmana, becomes a priest, then his loyalty to the principle becomes somewhat compromised, and therefore his sense of discrimination will get lost or will get contaminated. Therefore, he can over punish a person, or he can over pamper somebody. He will end up becoming partial. So, like you'll find, if you read Mahabharata, Vanaparva beginning, that when the Yudhishthira Maharaj lost everything in the gambling match, and Yudhishthira Maharaj and the Pandavas were going to the forest, there were many Brahmanas, they were following the Pandavas. That's a very beautiful chapter. How those Brahmanas were following the Pandavas, and Yudhishthira Maharaj was pleading with them, please don't come with us because I don't have any wealth to maintain all of you. So these Brahmanas, why they chose to follow the Pandavas was that because they preferred to stay with the poor Yudhishthira in the forest by eating meager fruits and roots in the forest instead of staying in Duryodhana's kingdom. Because by staying in the opulent Duryodhana's kingdom, their loyalty to the principles would get compromised. Their purity would get compromised. So, therefore, here Vasishta, Krishna Chakravartipad is pointing out that the reason why Vasishta over-punished Prishadra is that because he had taken the position of a priesthood. In fact, we will see this Vasishta over-punishing will come at least in 3 instances in the 9th canto. This story here in Prishadra's story, and later in the Sauda story, and later in the Nimi Maharaj story. So we'll see how Vasishta, he was little greedy for the wealth, and then that resulted in over punishing his disciples again and again. So when we talk about punishment, also there is a beautiful conversation in the Vanaparva between Draupadi and Yudhishthira Maharaj. So in that conversation, she is actually narrating the conversation which happened between Bali Maharaj and Prahlad Maharaj. So Bali Maharaj asked Prahlad Maharaj, which is actually best, forgiveness or the use of strength? So Prahlad Maharaj, he thought for some time and replied, neither forgiveness nor the use of strength is good in all situations. If one were to always forgive, then the servants, the dependents, and even the strangers would disrespect him. When one always forgives and never shows the strength to chastise and correct, then the mean-minded servants gradually will steal away a person's wealth and fail to favorably respond to the commands. On the other hand, if somebody always punishes it and never forgives, then he will find that soon all his servants and friends will leave him. So therefore, one who simply punishes and never forgives, so therefore everyone will start, somebody who is always punishing, everyone will start hating this person, because he never forgives somebody, he is always punishing. And when there is a slightest opportunity, the people will try to do something inconvenience to harm that person. So therefore, forgiveness and punishment should be exhibited at the appropriate time and appropriate occasion in the appropriate proportion. So Prahlad Maharaj told Bali Maharaj that the following persons should be forgiven. Somebody who has done nice service in the past, even if he is guilty of a grave fault, he should be forgiven. Like here, Prashadra, he dedicated his life for cow protection by not getting married and by sacrificing his night sleep. Not like a typical our night security guards, which we see usually. They end up sleeping. But he was awake, he was alert throughout the night. So he has done actually nice service in the past. Even if we have considered that he has even though he has killed a cow, so he should have been forgiven. And one who offends due to ignorance or foolishness should also be forgiven. So Prishadra's mistake was done out of ignorance because it was night time, he couldn't see properly. And thirdly, one who is a first-time offender should be forgiven. And one who has committed some wrong against his will, sometimes a person circumstantially, accidentally commits a mistake or not a premeditated sin, sometimes, so that can be forgiven. So other offenders may sometimes be forgiven just to create a good public image. And then Prahlad Maharaj said the following persons should not be forgiven. One who has knowingly offended but claims to be innocent. Even if his offense is slight, then he should not be forgiven. And a second offender, no matter how small his misdemeanor, is like a person who keeps committing offenses repeatedly. He should not be forgiven. So here Vasishta Rishi, he actually made a mistake in over punishing Prishadra. And let us see what was the response of Prishadra. So that is a interesting verse, 10th verse. Evam shaptastu guruna pratyagrishnat kritanjalihi adarayat vratam veera urdvareta munipriyam. But you can read translation.
When the hero Prasadra was thus cursed by his spiritual master, he accepted the curse with folded hands. Then, having controlled his senses, he took the vow of brahmacharya, which is approved by all great sages.
So Prishadra, he just accepted the curse with folded hands, and then he observed the vow of a brahmacharya. I'll read the next verse also, and then we'll discuss something about the Prishadra's response. So verse number 11 to 13. Vasudeve Bhagavati Sarvat Manipare Male Ekantitvam Gato Bhaktya Sarvabhuta Suhrit Samaha Vimukta Sangha Shantatma Sanyataksho Parigraha Yadrichayopapannena Kalpayan Vrittimatmanah Atmanyatmanamadaya Jnanatripta Samahitaha Vichachara Mahimetam Jadandabadirakritihi.
Thereafter, Prasadra gained relief from all responsibilities, became peaceful in mind, and established control over all his senses. Being unaffected by material conditions, being pleased with whatever was available by the grace of the Lord to maintain body and soul together, and being equal toward everyone, he gave full attention to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vasudev, who is the transcendental supersoul, free from material contamination. Thus, Prasadra, fully satisfied in pure knowledge, always keeping his mind on the Supreme Personality of Godhead, achieved pure devotional service to the Lord and began traveling all over the world without affection for material activities as if he were deaf, dumb, and blind.
Evam vritto vanam gatva drishtva davagnimuತ್ತಿtam tenopayukta karano brahma prapa param munihi.
With this attitude, Prasadra became a great saint, and when he entered the forest and saw a blazing forest fire, he took this opportunity to burn his body in the fire. Thus, he achieved the transcendental spiritual world.
So here in these verses, Prishadra's response to the curse was given. Prishadra actually, he just accepted the curse without any protest. Like he did not say to Vasishta, why did you uselessly curse me without reflecting first? So although he was over punished by the Guru, he remained faithful to the Guru, and he attained liberation without the obstacles. So yesterday also the question was asked about why this 9th canto is termed as liberation. And we will see one of the reasons is that we will see in the various stories in the 9th canto that how the different kings achieved liberation. That comes almost in many stories. Therefore, this 9th canto is also titled as liberation. So sometimes we may have a wrong authority. Like in the case of Prishadra, definitely Vasishta had made a mistake. Vasishta was over punished, being subjected to the 3 modes, being because of the influence of Rajoguna, he actually over punished. So sometimes we may have a wrong authority. Even in that case, sometimes one may wonder that my authority has certain fault or this thing, but will I make advancement? Uh, Sometimes situations are like that. Could be, say, a temple or a family or different things, different situations. So suppose a man is depositing money in a bank by putting faith in the cashier. But the cashier loots the money. He actually mishandles the money. So even though the person had actually trusted the cashier and the cashier actually misappropriates the fund, but because the person had trusted the bank and trusted the representative of the bank in the form of the cashier, and when he reports that how his money was misappropriated by the cashier, the bank or the government will definitely reward that common person who put that money, uh, uh, who invested trust in the cashier, who invested trust in the bank. So similarly, sometimes a guru may be in ignorance or an authority may have certain shortcomings. But because Prishadra had the right attitude, and he accepted that curse without any protest, he attained liberation without obstacles. So, especially we find in the 11th to 13th verse, how he actually completely focused his mind on the Supreme Lord Vasudeva, and he saw everyone equally, and he just subsisted by whatever comes on its own accord, completely controlled his mind and senses, did not accept charity, and by completely fixing his mind on the Lord, he actually transcended the curse. He acted as if like a dumb, deaf, and mad person, and he transcended the curse. So Prabhupada quotes that Yastvindra Gopa Matavendra Mahosva Karma Karmani Bandhanu Rupa Falabhajana Matanoti Karmani Nirdagati Kintucha Bhakti Bhajam. So by the practice of bhakti, bhakti can actually completely burn away one's karmas. Karmani nirdagati kintucha bhakti bhajam. So he was supposed to become a Shudra in his next life, but by his intense practice of bhakti, he actually transcended that situation. He attained perfection. He avoided the consequence of becoming a Shudra. So, and another point is that, like even in the third canto and also in the 10th canto, it is mentioned. The third canto, in the Jaya Vijay episode, Vishnu is telling to the four Kumaras, the Jaya Vijay, Ye Brahmanan Mayidiya Kshipator Chayantas Tushyadrida Smita Sudokshita Padma Vaktra Vanyanuraga Kalayatmajet Grananta Sambodayantyagam Ivagam Upakrita. So those people, on the other hand, they captivate my heart, who are gladdened in heart, and who their lotus faces enlightened by the nectarian smiles respect the Brahmanas, even though the Brahmanas utter harsh words. And they look upon the Brahmanas as my own self and pacify them by praising them in loving words. Even as a son would appease an angry father, as I am pacifying. So Vishnu says that when a Brahmana chastises somebody, but the person who is chastised, instead of becoming angry, when he tries to pacify the Brahmana, by that behavior towards the Brahmana, like I am conquered by that behavior. I am happy with that behavior. And Vishnu also exhibited the same behavior in regards to Bhrigumuni, when Bhrigumuni kicked that Vishnu. So even at the end of the story of King Nriga, Krishna is giving some instructions about treating the Brahmanas, because of that, in that story, King Nriga ended up displeasing a Brahmana, and then because of that, he became a lizard. So in that story, and our Krishna is saying that those who lust after the wealth of the Brahmanas become short-lived and are defeated, and they lose their kingdoms and become snakes who trouble others. And then he says, Vipram Kritagasam api naiva druhyata mamaka. Never treat a learned Brahmana harshly, even if he has sinned. Gnantam bahushapantam va namaskuruta nityashaha. Even if he attacks you physically or repeatedly curses you, always continue to offer him obeisances. So, like the same behavior is exhibited by Prashadra towards Vasishta. He did not actually protest. So when we even once Radhanath Maharaj mentioned that there is a relative sense of what is right and wrong, and there is the absolute sense of what is right and wrong. From our particular level of consciousness, the absolute sense of right and wrong is what will help us to come close to Krishna. And the relative sense is what is literally correct. But we are more concerned with what helps us to serve Krishna. We should be concerned with the absolute sense of what is right and wrong. But having said that, I'll mention some points about seeking justice and focusing on transcendence. So, for example, like in the real life situation, many times we go through certain situations where it may appear that we are mistreated, or we were over punished, or we are not given proper reward for something. So many times we are actually caught up in a dichotomy. Do we seek justice or should we transcend it? For seeking justice, you have to work in the external world. That involves a lot of hard work, definitely. And for transcendence also, you have to work hard, but in the internal heart, in the internal world. So should we seek justice or should we seek transcendence? But many times, both the things will go hand in hand, actually. One has to, many times in practical life situations, both will go hand in hand. Both may have to we may have to put effort on both directions. Sometimes you have to, but in some situations, like you have to just ignore the effort of seeking justice in the external world and completely focus only on transcendence. That means completely focus on your internal heart to get rid of the negative emotions. Because sometimes, like a devotee, when a devotee is personally insulted, a devotee tolerates it. But when the Lord or the others are blasphemed or insulted, the devotee does not tolerate it. He will actually work to seek justice. So sometimes, so therefore, sometimes you have to stop you cannot work hard for seeking justice in the external world. You have to focus only on transcendence. And also, like for example, if you see Kurukshetra war was about seeking justice in the external world. And Pandavas had to undergo a really very hard work they had to put. Pandavas, Arjuna did not want to seek justice. He did not want to fight the war. But on a very personal reason, because he was reluctant to fight with Bhishma and Drona. But because the Pandavas seeking justice, it is not concerned only with their personal convenience or inconvenience. It is concerned with the whole world. It is concerned with establishing dharma for the whole world. So when you are not seeking justice, when it is going to affect the larger society, at that time, if you don't seek justice, then that is wrong. Just because seeking justice, it involves quite hard work actually. The Pandavas, they lost everything. They lost even their children. All their children got killed. They lost. So many people got killed in seeking justice. But that seeking justice is connected with the larger society. It is connected with establishing dharma for the larger society. So when the seeking justice is connected, is only for your personal this thing, then scripture says that that should be, one should tolerate and just transcend it. But if the seeking justice is going to encourage that person to commit more and more mistakes and affect the larger society, then one should not actually be lazy in not seeking justice. So, for example, even in the Shamantaka jewel story, people started actually putting, they started, rumors started spreading that Krishna is the one who stole the Shamantaka jewel. Krishna only killed Satyajit. And Krishna, how much he had to work hard in order to prove his innocence. Like he took all the people, so many people from Dwaraka to the forest, and he was fighting with the Jambavan for, I think, 27 days or something like that. I'm not remembering. Like it was really a very hard work actually. And then proved that how he did not steal the Shamantaka jewel, he did not kill Shatrajit. So therefore, that yes, sometimes you have to seek justice because Krishna had to prove his innocence. He had to prove his reputation because in order to maintain his reputation, that is required for performing his service. And in the case of Parishit Maharaj, when he was cursed to die by Shringi, Mahabharata describes how Parishit Maharaj worked hard in the external world to protect himself from Takshaka by building a palace, glass palace, and so that nobody can enter that palace. And Bhagavatam focuses on how Parishit Maharaj worked hard in the internal world by completely taking shelter of Krishna Katha. So, so therefore, both will go hand in hand many times. But sometimes you may have to avoid working hard in the external world to seek justice, and you have to focus only on the internal world to transcend. In material consciousness, people only want to seek justice in the external world, and they don't want to work on the internal world to transcend only. Then the material consciousness, they don't they can't think that, oh, it is my karma that I got cheated. It is my karma that I got this treatment. They only want to take revenge and seek justice. Badla lena chahte hain actually. So therefore, So here in the case of Prashadra, he just completely focused on his transcending the curse by focusing his mind on Krishna. Because just like seeking justice in the external world is a hard work, even transcending that is also a really hard work. Because many times the emotions are so strong, that to actually to suppress or to transcend those negative emotions, many times it's a really a hard work actually. Because we may think in our mind, okay, it is not, this person is not at my fault, it is my karma which is coming through this person. This person is instrument of my karma. We may think like that, and just a few moments later, without even realizing, our mind will be thinking of negative towards the other person who caused harm to us. And then again we try to see, oh, I should not be thinking, I should not be having this revenge fantasy towards this person. But then after a few seconds, without even realizing, again those revenge fantasies are coming. That is how the emotions are so powerful. That's why it is said that emotions are like the tail of a dog. You try to straighten the tail of a dog and it appears very straight, and you will see that, oh, this tail will always remain straight hereafter. At the moment you leave it, it comes back to the same shape. It becomes bent. So therefore, transcending those negative emotions by focusing on Krishna, that's also really a hard work, and Prashadra actually performed that hard work, and that is what is explained in those 3 verses. Vasudeve Bhagavati Sarvatmani Paremade. And Prashadra became a great saint, and he entered the forest and saw a blazing forest fire. And another point is that from the point of view of sometimes superior, when somebody is deeply hurt in a particular situation, and he is coming to some superior seeking justice. But in the superior, instead of giving the practical solution how to seek justice, sometimes the superior only talks about transcending. Then that can be that may be insensitivity on the part of the superiors. So sometimes sometimes the superior may have to guide only based on how to transcend it, because the situation may be like that. Like Brahmaji told Prithu Maharaj that understand that you are supposed to perform. Like Indra was doing all the mistakes, but Brahma told Prithu Maharaj, just stop with this 99 sacrifice. You are destined to perform only 99 sacrifices. If you try to go against the destiny, you will actually go into the darkest region of ignorance. Uh, just forget about this 99 and just forget about this 100 sacrifice. Just stop with here. And you are an advanced devotee. Why should you become? What is the need for you to perform so many karma kanda? Whether it's 99 or 100, it's all same for you, because you are an advanced devotee of the Lord. So Brahmaji told Prithu Maharaj only based on how to transcend the situation, and don't try to punish Indra, rather establish a friendship with Indra. So yeah, sometimes the superior has to give guidance that just focus on transcendence. But sometimes the superior is expected to give some practical solution for how to seek justice. But at that time, if the superior only speaks about, oh, you just transcend, then that can be a mistake on the part of the superior also. There can be insensitivity on the part of the superior. So these are just different thoughts that can be based on various situations, how to deal with the such kind of injustice on the part of the subordinate and the part of the superiors. So with this, the Prashadra story comes to end. We will go through the remaining verses, and then if somebody can, I'll open this thing for any
Prabhuji,
discussion.
some question can we ask?
Yes. Lagos. Okay.
Prabhuji, we have sent first question in your chat. We have sent some question, Prabhuji.
Okay. I'll see. How is the priest occupation similar or different from a paid Brahmana in today's ISKCON? Yeah, that is why I mentioned. See, from the point of view of the Vedic culture, from the point of view of the highest occupation of a Brahmana, a priest occupation or a paid Brahmana is inferior. But from the point of view of, say, working for some MNC or working for a, at least a person is becoming a priest or doing deity worship and getting money, that is superior from that point of view. So there are so many. One is we have to understand Kali Yuga. We are in a we are at a time where the Varnashram culture is not. It has very much degraded. So on a practical level, many times people people have to maintain their families, and suppose if they take up only the occupation of a priest or something, they may not get so much of money, and so many complicated situations are there. But we have to be aware of these principles, and we have to be aware that how our sense of discrimination can get affected because of working for certain people who have a wrong temperament, who have a wrong ideology. When we take money from certain people, how that can actually affect our thought process. That's why Rupa Goswami and Sanatana Goswami, they said that we are lower than Jagai and Madai because we are we are serving the Malechas, like that they mentioned. But somehow, many times in Kali Yuga, that may be the situation for most people. Like Prabhupada says that 5,000 years back, there was one Dhritarashtra and one Vidura came in order to remove the attachment of the Dhritarashtra and in order to make him detached. But now there is a Dhritarashtra at every home, like that he says. The same principle. 5,000 years back, there was one Bhishma. Bhishma was a pure devotee, but he was working for the Kauravas. He was on the side of the Kauravas. But now there may be Bhishmas and almost Bhishma-like situation for almost for every devotee. They may be devotees, but they may be in a situation where they are to serve actually different wrong masters and masters. So we have to be aware of this principle, and we have to see the best use of a bad bargain and how we can make our situation more pure, how we can make our lifestyle more pure. That everybody has to analyze and make the appropriate changes according to this principle, according to the situation, and at least on the consciousness level, one can try to develop the right aspiration. Sometimes on a physical level, it may not be possible to say leave a particular occupation which a person is going through, which a person is like having currently. But at least we can try to have the right aspiration in our consciousness level, and we can, on a practical level, whatever extent we can possible, we can try to improve. how to see distant learning and all the courses which are paid, even in ISKCON, as a Brahminical education. Yeah, it is definitely, from Vedic point of view, it is definitely paid courses. You can't, I can give, there's a quote. 1 minute, I'll send you one quote. It can be, many quotes are there. So few quotes I'll mention. In Manu Samhita, it is said, Brutak Adhyapako Yascha, Brutak Adhyapitas Tata, Shudra Shishyo Gurushchaiva, Vagdushta Kunda Golakau. Those who charge fees for teaching and those who pay fees for studying, and those who are disciples of Shudra, those who are spiritual masters of the Shudras, those who speak harshly, and many list is given. So especially those who charge fees for teaching, those who pay fees for studying, all these, they will not be allowed to participate in the Vedic rituals or in the Shraddha ceremonies, like Manu Samhita says. And there are other quotes are also there. Even in the Bhagavatam, there are quotes in the 7th canto. And the Dhruva Maharaj Falastuti, it is mentioned. One who recites this narration of the Dhruva Maharaj story, we can apply to any Bhagavatam story. One who narrates this Bhagavatam story without expectation for any wealth, he will attain perfection. Or it is mentioned that, or one should recite the Bhagavatam only with the expectation, the fee which I want, the dakshina which I want, which I am expecting from this narration of the Bhagavatam is that the people hear with faith. That is the only dakshina which I am expecting from the audience. And with that expectation, if a person narrates the Bhagavatam, then that speaker will attain perfection. And this is a statement. If you read Prabhupada's purport on that verse, he speaks very strongly about the professional Bhagavatam. Professional Bhagavatam can be applied for reciters as well as for the organization also, the censor. So these principles are there. We have to be aware of that. So, of course, sometimes Prabhupada has mentioned there are some Prabhupada quotes. He says that in this day and age, if you don't keep a fee, if you don't keep a charge, people don't take anything seriously. He told that, see, in this particular program in New York, we kept a charge of certain dollars, $4 or $5, something he mentioned. Therefore, people came. So if you don't keep a charge, then people don't take it seriously. But the eternal principle is that education should not be sold. Like in Kali Yuga, sometimes the contextual quotes are there. In order to develop the seriousness of the people, we may keep a charge, especially for new people. But still, the eternal principle should be visible everywhere. Many times what happens, we take that quote of Prabhupada, or people will take it seriously when we keep a charge. But we have to really introspect. Are we just using that quote and hiding our intention to maybe generate more money using that quote? Or are we truly, is it that, are we just truly want to use that quote just to make people serious? Because sometimes, many times we may use certain Prabhupada quotes, but we use the Prabhupada quotes to hide our certain intention, actually. To hide our intention to, say, to generate more money by selling education or something. But Prabhupada quotes are there, for instance, to make people serious. So generally, if even now, there are so many dharmic organizations. In ISKCON, you may say, okay, everywhere is equal, fees charged. But I can give number of examples, because last few years, since I started studying Sanskrit and Nyaya under different teachers, I came across different people. Most of the people, they follow this principle very strictly of not charging for education. And like one devotee who has been studying since 10, 12 years under different teachers. He was studying under, he went to study under a certain teacher in Goa, in Gurukul. And he studied for 7, 8 months. And first of all, he didn't charge a single fee. And even he was providing accommodation for the students. He was providing actually the food, everything for the student. That's how the Gurukuls run. And then when he was about to leave after 7, 8 months, he came to give some dakshina to the teacher. And the teacher said that I cannot take this dakshina because you have not completed your education which you are supposed to complete. You are leaving in between. And he was very strict. He firmly said, I cannot accept this dakshina because you have not completed the education. And then the student had to convince, the devotee had to convince that no, you please take it, you use it for some cow protection or something like that. He convinced him. So there are people, and he is actually not even a Vaishnava, maybe from Advaita Sampradaya, etc. Although they may be having Advaitavad philosophy, but in this principle of education, they are miles ahead, we can say, compared to what we have in ISKCON actually. So therefore, there are many people, who follow this thing, because the reason is that, like, education is like a building temple in the hearts of the people. So when you want to actually build physical temples, we want to build temples which will last long. If we see so many temples, the traditional temples in India, whether North India or South India, so temples are standing since how many years? Many temples are standing since like hundreds of years actually. So whenever the kings want to build a temple, they would actually want to build stone temples which will last for hundreds of years in the future. And building stone temples, it requires a huge effort. Many times the temple would be built in just to build the temple, it would require some 100 years or to 150 years. There are many temples like that. One king would start, and then his son or his grandson would actually complete the building of the temple, because they want the temple to last long for hundreds of years to come in the future. So education is nothing but building actually temples in the hearts of the people. And if you want the temple to in the hearts of the people to remain strong, and it should remain for a long time in the future, and then the core principle of education is that the knowledge should not be sold. So that may be hard work actually, because you have to generate finance for actually how to run the education, etc. It's hard work involved. But only when there is hard work, the result is also long lasting. Otherwise, one can build a temple with build temple with a concrete and this thing, but that will not last long. Stone temples will last long. Similarly, the temple in the hearts of the people to remain last long. So this principle of education is something very important. There are many, and if we see, if we study the historically, all the Gurukul system in India from the Vedic times, whether the education was actually charged, because that is important from the point of view of the teacher as well as the student actually. It is important for because if the teacher charges something, then he may compromise something for the sake of the money. Because one of the quality of a guru is that Tadvijnanartham Sagurum Eva Abhigache Samitpani Shrotriyam Brahmanishtam. Brahmanishtam means the Guru is actually, his loyalty is towards the knowledge. And suppose if the system of teaching is actually based around money, then because of money, the purity of that knowledge, the loyalty to the knowledge can get compromised. And if the student actually pays and then learns, then then the tendency what may come is that then he may not feel that, like, ultimately, oh, I'm paying, therefore this person is teaching. Like if we see in the any schools and colleges, why actually the students don't have actually respect for the teacher or this thing? Because one of the core principle is the money is involved. They feel that the teacher is teaching because he is paid, and I am paying money, and therefore he is teaching. There are many coaching institutes. If you go to Bombay, many coaching institutes, and suppose if the teacher does not teach properly, immediately the students would go and give feedback to the administration, and then and they would give a strong feedback to the teacher. So that's how the system is like. There is no, the principle of gratitude is not there, and also one of the crucial quality of a student is that prashna kale pratiksha. Vedanta Desika mentions some different qualities of a guru and disciple. One of the quality of a disciple is that prashna kale pratiksha. That means he should wait for the time when the guru would actually give the knowledge. And suppose if the system of education is based on money is involved, a moment when you pay money, when you go to a restaurant and when you are paying for money for the say food, and suppose if the waiter is not giving, if the waiter is delaying, then immediately would say, oh, why the food has not come? And if there is some improper taste is there, then you immediately would complain, oh, why are you giving the cold preparation? So there is the tendency for demanding will come. So from the point of view of the student, one of the important qualities, prashna kale pratiksha, and this quality, when the money is involved, then the quality of demanding will come, and then the knowledge will not go deep into the heart. So therefore, there are many reasonings. I just mentioned a few reasonings in regards to this point of this one. But yeah, one has to see how one can do. And generally, when people, when they, even on a practical level, like once I was just proposing to some people actually about why don't we just keep it pay as you like for this, at least for this education. And they said one devotee said we tried that for this particular course. In fact, 140 people registered for this course because we didn't keep any fee. But at the end, nobody paid. Very few people paid. Like that, they said. But I said, this is a very, very narrow way of thinking that at the end of the course, very few people paid. Like it is like thinking, oh, I sowed the seed. I watered for 3 days. And then I saw in the 4th day, there are no fruits in the tree. No, when you are actually planting a mango sapling or something, expecting that after 4 days of watering, you will get a mango fruits. And that is something unnatural actually. You have to see the fruits in a matter of actually few decades. Many times you will not be present to see the fruits. So education is nothing but it is actually watering it is like watering the trees. The fruits are there for the next generation to see, or it will come in the future. So therefore, in education, when we keep so I mentioned to this devotee, expecting that we kept this course without any charge, and then after the course, very few people paid. So that means it is like expecting fruits to come in the mango tree after 3 days, actually. So therefore, one is the Brahminical education is there, but then the system of education should also be based on Brahminical principles. So therefore, this verse Shreyan Swadharmo Viguna Paradharma Sonishtitat, sometimes the education can be driven with a Vaishya mindset. Our education may be driven with a Kshatriya mindset. So then sometimes these things come. So therefore, one has to be open to see like how others actually run. Even now, there are many dharmic organizations, although they could be Advaitavadis or they could be other this thing. But many places, they still follow this principle very strictly. Actually. I don't know, I give a very long answer.
Prabhuji, just a quick question on this, what we are discussing. Just wanted to
Hmm.
understand on the subject of charity. What was the understanding of charity during the time of Vedic culture? Is it something that the teacher would ask the disciple at the end of the program or the course or the training? Or was it there is something particular to be asked in it, or the disciple would be inspired, self-inspired, and give? The reason I ask because when we have this initiation or anything, we read about Prabhupada's
Hmm.
life also. There's always a disciple would bring something for Srila Prabhupada as a gift. There's always that token of some material thing which is given as an aspect of gratitude.
Hmm.
So, what is this whole
Hmm.
understanding of charity in that way?
Yeah, sometimes the guru asks a particular dakshina at the end of the. We see Sandipani Muni asking Krishna and Balaram that you bring back my son. Some other instances are also there. But a guru may ask a particular dakshina based on the uh, capacity, not a demand something. After completing after giving the education, and and moreover, sometimes he may not ask, but the student actually gives voluntarily according to his capacity, whatever is possible from his side. And more than that, the disciple also uh, how he actually gives charity, the dakshina to the guru is that by continuing the legacy of that education, by actually by starting his own gurukul and teaching that knowledge to other people, and or if somebody is say Kshatriya or Vaishya who learned under the guru, then he may not be teaching, but he may support that cause of education. He may support other gurukuls. In that way, he may contribute. And of course, in the traditional this one, the brahmanas should be maintained by the kings. There were Vaishyas and Kshatriyas. They were maintaining the brahmanas, and therefore they also they did not actually have to charge. But in the current times, yeah, we see everywhere actually charging, etc. I won't say, sometimes they are helpless. Actually, people they may not want to charge, but sometimes there can be really financial crisis and this thing. Sometimes they may be charging in order to run the say temple or something like that. Hmm. Uh, so because currently the system of varnashram where it's not that the government is maintaining all the temples. In fact, there are so many temples, whether I don't know, Maharashtra also definitely, but many places in Tamil Nadu and others, the temples are hardly maintained by the government. There are even the basic offerings to the deities get hardly any offerings to them because there's no, the government does not provide any financial support for the deities nor for the archakas, etc. So in such a situation, sometimes even this principle one becomes a compromise helplessly. Commercialization of the education, etc. So therefore, sometimes we cannot just simply stamp, okay, these people are say selling or greedy. So we also have to see the overall picture of the education. The situation in Kali Yuga where the Varnashram system is not there. But at the same time, sometimes we have to think that how we can improve the purity of the education. How we can improve, how we can actually follow this principle, at least the next year, how we can actually follow this principle little more with greater purity, how we can actually keep the fee very reasonably, or can we give an option that even if somebody does not have the fee, how the person, the scholarship option, how a person can learn even without paying the fee, because some people may genuinely having certain financial this thing. So those options should be kept, or we may give this one, suggested donation is this much, so that sometimes we may have to we at least we should have the right aspiration that we want to follow this principle purely. But at present, I'm not able to follow. I'm able to follow at this level only. Maybe I will aspire to follow to this level, this principle in a little more level the next time. So we can think on a practical way. So about this principle of charity, yeah, as I mentioned, that it's a voluntarily a person gives dakshina according to his capacity, and also dakshina is not just after the education you give certain money, but it's about carrying forward that legacy by teaching that knowledge what you have learned, or facilitating that education by supporting the educational cause. That way also.
Hare Krishna. I have one question, bro. This you're telling about this Prashadra's reaction to Vasishta's curse, that he simply accepted.
Mm.
Then we see about in case of Nimi Maharaj, he is also like a pure devotee. So there he counter cursed. So how do we understand that?
Nimi Maharaj. Yeah, Nimi Maharaj, yeah, that's a different story. See, Nimi Maharaj, Nimi Maharaj story comes in that Nimi Maharaj wanted to perform a sacrifice, and he asked Vasishta, and Vasishta said that I will complete the sacrifice of Indra, and then I will come back to perform your sacrifice, and wait till that time. Don't actually perform this yajna till I come. But the principle of dharma is that you don't delay the principle, you don't delay the any good activity. So Vasishta went to perform the yajna for the demigods, and that took a long time. And Nimi Maharaj did not want to delay the yajna because he was performing for the welfare of the people, and therefore he appointed another priest and performed the sacrifice. And then when Vasishta came back, and Vasishta became angry, how can you perform a sacrifice without me? And he cursed him. And Nimi Maharaj could understand that Vasishta is really a greedy person, because he was interested in the dakshina from both the yajnas, from the devatas also, and also from me. And therefore, he didn't want to miss out any dakshina. Therefore, he told me to wait. And then because he lost the dakshina from me, therefore he cursing me. He could understand that greediness, and therefore he cursed him. He also cursed him to die. And then when the other Brahmanas tried to revive Nimi Maharaj said that don't revive me. So it is not mentioned that Nimi Maharaj cursing is actually wrong, actually, because Vasishta had become fallen. So you see, in the Vedic culture, definitely I mentioned that verse which Vishnu spoke to the four Kumaras, where even if the Brahmanas spoke harsh words, you should be pleasing, you should try to pacify that Brahmanas, that is there. But then we also have instances in the Vedic culture where Bhishma fought with his guru Parashuram, Arjuna fought with his guru Drona and Bhishma because they were on the wrong side of dharma. And Nimi Maharaj, he cursed his guru Vasishta because he was really greedy, actually. Just imagine that just because you don't want to lose the dakshina, you have to postpone the sacrifice for next 1,000 years. What an illogical actually point, actually. Sometimes we may see is it important that you performing a sacrifice, is it important? Or the sacrifice should be performed somehow or other, which is important. But Vasishtha was concerned that I should perform the sacrifice so that I get the dakshina. Instead of thinking that, oh, let the sacrifice not be delayed for the welfare of the world. Sometimes, so even in a preacher, we see in a preaching organization, sometimes if somebody goes and preaches in some region, some out of zone or something, and then some person in that zone raises, how can you actually come and preach in this zone? Actually, you have to take my permission. You have to connect everyone to me. Actually, instead of becoming happy that, oh, there was for so long, there was no preaching happening there, and somebody came and did preaching, and he's inspiring people to chant Hare Krishna. Instead of seeing in a positive note that this person is doing some good work and facilitating that person to do more preaching, then we say, oh, you have to take my permission, you have to call me or something like that. That's also the same attitude of Vasishtha actually. So, so these stories are not simply stories in the books. Many times, all these psychologies which we see in the Bhagavatam, different psychologies of the personalities in the stories, we may find this psychology even in the current time actually. So, so Nimi Maharaj cursing Vasishtha, it was not mentioned as a mistake. Vasishtha, Nimi Maharaj, there were he cursed Vasishtha because he didn't perform a sacrifice for his own sake actually, for the welfare of the world, and Vasishtha was unnecessarily putting a condition, don't stop this sacrifice for so many years. And when Nimi Maharaj was given a chance to come back alive, and you see the verses spoken by Nimi Maharaj. Nimi Maharaj said that no, I don't want to get again another material body. I just want to attain liberation. And he exhibited complete detachment. So even if he had committed a mistake by cursing Vasishtha, but he didn't want to regain that body again when he was offered a chance to come back alive. So we can see like that. And also in the Vedic culture, it is not that you just blindly keep following the superior all the time. Just like that verse is mentioned, how you should respect the Brahmanas, even the Brahmana chastise. But we also find other examples where Krishna telling Arjuna that no, the person whom you considered as superiors, they have fallen from their position as a superior. They have become the servants of the wealth. So you must shoot arrows at them. That's what Krishna told Arjuna. So that's also there.
Thank you, bro. So one more just short question. This like cow protection, we see about Prashadra, how he dedicated his life for the cow protection, and we understand the importance of cow. So some verse is there in Uddhav Gita, I think, where Lord Krishna says, he gives the analogy of something is useless as taking care of a cow who has
It
stopped
does not
giving
give
milk.
me.
Yeah, so then how do you understand?
Shabda Brahmani Nishnato na Nishnayat Pare Yadi. That verse is there. Yeah, Uddhava Krishna says that the person studies all the Vedas but does not come to the point of surrendering to me. It is like taking care of a cow that does not give milk. So that verse is not emphasizing that, oh, don't take care of a cow that does not give milk. That is not the emphasis of that verse. That actually shows what the verse is trying to say is that actually taking care of a cow involves a great effort uh, to maintain the cow for taking the cow for grazing or protecting the particular grazing land from the other animals, and cow protection. In taking care of the cow, a person becomes very regulated. It's a huge effort involved. But after the huge effort, if the cow does not give milk, then like what? That means you are performing so much of effort, but the cow does not give milk. It is not saying that don't take care of a cow which does not give milk. In fact, to take care of old cows, that's a great service. Old cows, they don't give milk, but it's a great service because people actually When the cows don't give milk, they send the cows to slaughterhouses. But if we can have, just like many times old age homes are there for people, similarly old age home for the cows, for the old cows, that's a great service in the current time. But the emphasis of that verse is that a person performs a great effort of studying all the Vedangas and all the Puranas and becomes a Trivedi, Chaturvedi, but does not come to the point of surrendering to Krishna, then what is the use of that effort if it does not come to the point of complete ultimate essence? That's what is emphasized.
Prabhuji,
Yeah,
can you have break, Prabhuji?
one question is there, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.
Yeah, there are many. I see in the chat box. I was.
Prabhuji,
I think we'll just take a break for 10 minutes, and then I'll continue. We'll take a break for 10 minutes. 12:55 we'll start.
Can I ask one question, Prabhuji?
Yes.
Regarding this point, Prabhuji, seeking justice or we should transcend. So in it, you told opinion of His Holiness Radhana Swami Maharaj, Prabhuji. So we couldn't hear, Prabhuji. So just can you elaborate on that?
Maharaj's point is, what he said is that there is a relative sense of what is right and wrong, and there is the absolute sense of what is right and wrong. And he said, from our particular level of consciousness, the absolute sense of what is right and wrong is what will help us to come close to Krishna. And the relative sense of what is right and wrong is literally what is correct. But we should be more concerned with what is right and wrong in the absolute point of view than from the right and wrong in the relative point of view, because the absolute sense of right and wrong is that which will help us come close to Krishna. Like, for example, the relative sense of right and wrong, Vasishta is wrong, Prashadra is right actually. But in the absolute sense of right and wrong, Prashadra accepted, okay, I am wrong, and whatever Vasishta has cursed me, let me accept it with gratitude. That is right, and then he accepted it. And from relative sense of right and wrong, Indra, who was stealing the horse, he is wrong, and Prithu Maharaj trying to punish Indra is right. But from an absolute sense of right and wrong, Brahmaji telling Indra, Prithu Maharaj to stop performing the 100th sacrifice and make friendship with Indra, that is right. And that will actually help Prithu Maharaj, that will help the entire world. Because, but the relative sense, which is literally in the literally what is right and wrong, is Indra is wrong and Prithu Maharaj is right. But from absolute point of view, Prithu Maharaj continuing to perform the 100th sacrifice, that is wrong. And he stopping the 100th sacrifice is right. That was what told by Brahmaji. And Prithu Maharaj actually, therefore, he stopped that. He was more concerned with the absolute sense of right and wrong. Relative sense, Shringi cursing Parishit Maharaj is wrong. For a small mistake to die within 7 days. From an absolute sense, Parishit Maharaj felt that, oh, this is Krishna has come in the form of the curse in order to make me detached and attain him.
One more thing, question is, Prabhuji. You told that these varnas are there, Vaishya, Kshatriya, and Brahmana. According to their nature, everybody has some greed, like Brahmana has greed for knowledge. They are not satisfied. Kshatriyas are not satisfied with influence, and Vaishyas are not satisfied with earning money. So, and Prabhuji, according to my understanding that understood that in Brahmachari ashram, so this obedience is most important, is basis. He and then Prabhuji in Brahmachari ashram, how a candidate should maintain his varnas, Prabhuji, because they have innate greed. These according to their nature, swabhavas. So, and so how he should balance Prabhuji this obedience and this greed which he has according to his nature.
See, greed for, say, when it's a greed for money, brahmacharya ashram, there is no, you are not going to earn money actually. It's not that we talk about greed for money is a natural for Vaishya. Brahmacharya ashram, it's not that you are going to start a business. If somebody is starting a business in Brahmacharya ashram, better maybe he should choose a situation outside. And if somebody is having greed for power, the Brahmacharya ashram, that is also not conducive as a Brahmachari. This one. Yes, we have to accept certain positions in a matter of service, HOD, whatever, calm, this thing. But if somebody has a greed for power, then also one has to introspect whether he's in the right situation. Because the desire for power is not wrong. But in which situation you are actually wanting. For a Kshatriya, the natural quality is to have control, to have influence, to seek power. So then he should choose a situation which will be conducive. He should choose an ashram which will be conducive for that. But if you have greed for knowledge, the Brahmacharya ashram, that is actually natural. That should actually sustain a person, the Brahmacharya ashram, because the Brahmachari is in nature is a student. Even if a person is teaching, at least he should never actually lose the habit of learning. I would say any Brahmachari, even if we have spent 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, at least 51% of the time should be for learning. That means because Brahmachari as a student that is a more natural thing. Although, of course, as a matter of in the moment we are performing teaching, preaching in the service of Lord Chaitanya, we do that. But we should never actually give up that learning attitude. That will actually learning more knowledge using the service of Krishna. That will help us. That is conducive.
One more question is, Prabhuji, in from verse 14, it appears that Prabhuji, this Prashadra has done suicide. He purposefully entered the fire. Means from translation, one may infer like that, Prabhuji.
He entered the forest and saw a blazing fire. He took this opportunity to return, to burn his body in the fire as he achieved the transcendental spiritual world. No, it's not generally suicide. In the modern world, it has a connotation of being frustrated, being depressed. A person commits suicide. Prashadra he not he sometimes like Prithu Maharaj, he at the last part of his life, all the mystic powers appeared, and he just accepted the mystic siddhi of dying at one's own will because he wanted to go back to Godhead fast. He was suffering from separation from the Lord. So Prashadra, sometimes great devotees, they it is something like a sati thing. The Prashadra may be not being able to tolerate separation from the Lord. He actually entered that forest fire, and Rishabhadev also entered forest fire. He entered that forest fire, and then he perfected his life. It's not like a suicide thing. Just one point I want to mention, and then go ahead because I have to finish. I wanted to finish third chapter, but at least want to finish to second chapter and go. So this thing I wanted to, there are many points in the chat box. Some seemed like a comments, but one question which I want to address is that when we charge fees for the courses, we are using it in the say temple service, Krishna service. Is it all right? Yeah, definitely. Wherever we are charging fees for the courses, the money is going to the temple services, Krishna services. There's no doubt about it. In that sense, it is not same like what we see in the outside world where the education is made as a commercial thing. But even in that case, still to follow the principle of education is important because, like, of course, we say Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Vraja. For the sake of Krishna, you can abandon all the dharmas. But like Arjuna, after hearing the Gita, he understood that it is Krishna's desire that I must fight the battle. Etechasi tata kuru. I will desire what I will execute your desire. And he understood Krishna desired that he must fight the battle. But in the beginning of the war, Yudhishthira Maharaj told, if anybody wants to switch over the sides at this point, they can switch over the sides. Already Pandavas had a smaller army and Kauravas had a much larger army. And the Pandavas were not fighting for any selfish reason. They were fighting for a selfless reason. They were fighting for Krishna's sake. But even in that situation, they wanted the people to make a voluntary decision of choosing to fight for them. He didn't try to put some psychological pressure. See, we are all fighting for Krishna, therefore don't go to the other side. We are fighting for Krishna. He didn't try to he didn't try to involve some philosophy and put some psychological pressure that you have to don't switch over to the other side. He gave a voluntary option. Anybody wants to switch over, they can choose the other side. So in that sense, although they were doing for Krishna's sake, but still he didn't want to interfere in the individual freedom of the people. He didn't want to interfere in the swatantra of the people. He wanted to follow that principle. So similarly, that we may be charging for the sake of Krishna, for the running temple, etc. But still, even in that also, we should try to follow this principle as far as possible. Because ultimately it is also because one of the reason is that because when we make a very big project beyond our capacity, which requires a huge financial burden, and as a chain reaction, many things start actually. As a just like the mathematics, and the first step you take some mistake or when you say mistake or whatever, some value, you take a wrong value, then as a chain reaction that gets carried out to different steps. Similarly, sometimes big, huge project as a result of that, many things as chain reaction start. These are some thoughts for introspection. And sometimes, we may be charging. So that could be apad. It can be kept as a apad dharma, as an emergency. Whether it should be continued for the rest of the time, for all time, or some compromise on the principle. Okay, at least let us try to follow this little more better in the next year. Let us keep some courses without charge, some courses with charge, and also give some options for scholarship. Because the main point is that we cannot see education in terms of how much money it is generating. Education is like agriculture. In agriculture, the more you use chemicals, in the short term, you may get a lot of output. The productivity may increase, but in the long term, the land will become dead. So similarly, but if we use a natural process for agriculture, in the long term, actually the land will be live and the land will give even much more than what you may get in the short term. Similarly, education, that when you follow this principle as far as possible, the short term you may not gain so much in terms of money, but then in the long term, you are sowing the seed of selflessness in the hearts of the people. When we run education without putting a when after the completing the course, when people give voluntarily as a dakshina, that we can accept. That is according to dharma. But without, when we use it as a selling, then we don't sow the seed of selflessness. When we keep it as a open, then will be sowing the seed of selflessness in the hearts of the people, and that will manifest in the form of a result which we cannot even imagine. And they will do something selfless in some place, because that impression, oh, I received something selflessly from this person, so I must do something selfless. And they may do something selfless to somebody in some other place, some other country, some other city, and that will make a deep impact. So that is the principle of not charging for the education. And these are some points which I mentioned, and we can think about it. So I'll go ahead. So we can read from the 15th verse translation. Somebody can read.
Hare Krishna. Yeah. Being reluctant to accept material enjoyment, Manu's youngest son, whose name was Kabi, gave up the kingdom before attaining full youth. Accompanied by his friends, he went to the forest, always thinking of the self-effulgent Supreme Personality of Godhead within the core of his heart. Thus he attained perfection. From Karusha, another son of Manu, came the Karusha dynasty, a family of Kshatriyas. The Karusha Kshatriyas were the kings of the northern direction. They were celebrated protectors of Brahminical culture and were all firmly religious. From the son of Manu, named Dhrishta, came Kshatriya caste called Dharshta, whose members achieved the position of Brahmanas in this world. Then from the son of Manu, named Nriga, came Sumati. From Sumati came Bhuta Jyoti, and from Bhuta Jyoti came Vasu.
So here we see the further sons of the Vaivasvata Manu are described. So there was one son, Kavi. He was reluctant to become the king, and he just went to the forest and focused his attention on the Supreme Lord, and he attained perfection. And from Karusha, the particular Kshatriya dynasty came. They were all protectors of the Brahminical culture. And from Drishta came a Kshatriya caste called as Dashtra, but their members achieved the position of a Brahmanas. So sometimes you will find examples in this chapter. Sometimes they are born in a Kshatriya dynasty, but some of them became the Brahmanas, some of them became the Vaishyas. So this shows that this Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, it is not according to the birth, but it is according to the qualities, guna and karma. So Prabhupada quotes this verse twice in this particular chapter. Yasya yal lakshanam proktam pumso varnabhi yanjakam yad anyatrapi drishyeta tat teneva vinirdishet. If the qualities of one group are found in the men of another, those men should be recognized by their qualities, by their symptoms, not by the caste of the family in which they were born. Birth is not at all important. So there was one question about how do we find our varna? Can we take an help of astrology? Yeah, that's also a bona fide. This one can, in order to find out one's varna, one can take the help of astrology, or one can introspect on one's own, or one can take guidance from somebody who is concerned with your welfare, who is actually whom you trust, and also the Varna also comes from the family in which you are born. Many times in India, many times the Varnashram is, whatever extent it is followed, generally the same family tradition. Somebody is a doctor, or somebody is a comes in a certain family of teacher, or this thing. Generally, the same, they continue the same profession. So these are different ways. Because we have to see our own satisfaction, or astrology guide and family tradition. So the son of Vasu was Pratika, whose son was Vogavan. Vogavan's son was also known as Vogavan, and his daughter was Vogavati. Sudarshana married that daughter. From Narishyanta came a son named Chitrasena, and from him a son named Riksha. And from Riksha came Meedwan, from Meedwan came Purna, and from Purna came Indrasena. So one thing we find in the 9th chapter, 9th canto, there is a description of the dynasties. So many names will come, list of names. and there will be hardly any purports actually. There will be just of names will be there. One may wonder, like, what is the need of actually describing this dynasty? Bhaktivinoda Thakur says in the Krishna Samhita about the importance of knowing the history and the knowledge of time. He says, history and knowledge of time are part of Artha Shastra, literature that gives material prosperity. If the people of India discuss history and time with reason and argument, they will be greatly benefited. By this process, they can also make spiritual advancement, and by mixing the waves of reasoning in the river of ancient belief, mass in the form of illusion will be destroyed, and in due course of time, when the bad smell of infamy is removed, the knowledge of the residents of India will become healthy. So he's telling about the importance of knowing the history and the knowledge of time, because knowing our ancestors, that gives a sense of identity with our dynasty, identity with our culture, with the country Bharatvarsha, and that will inculcate a sense of responsibility. Because we see the psychology, Krishna actually addressing Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita, says Kaunteya Matras Parshastu Kaunteya Shitoshna Sukha Dukkada Agama Apaino Nitya Tam Titikshasva Bharata. He's using the word Kaunteya and Bharata, and also in many places in the Gita, Krishna addresses Arjuna in relation to the dynasty, in relation to the family, because the reason is that by reminding Arjuna of his family connection, dynasty connection, he's telling Arjuna to act responsibly, according to the dynasty in which he has come from. So therefore, identification with the glorious past, identification especially with the glorious past of say particular family, dynasty, and Bharatvarsha, because Bharatvarsha, so many great kings appeared, and that will help us to not actually act irresponsibly in a materialistic way. Therefore, further in that case, knowing the history will be helpful. So, especially in India, in many places where the Europeans actually invaded and they killed so many people, they looted the country. And then after looting and killing so many people, but they rewrote the history. They wrote the history by actually hiding all the violence which they committed. But in many countries, later the history was rewritten. History was rewritten, and like what all injustices was done by the colonizers, they were all exposed. But India is one country, although so many people invaded, and even before, and so many such glorious kings ruled India from different dynasties, Chola dynasty, Chera, Pandya dynasty, and the north, so many say Rajputs and so many other people, glorious Dharmic kings, Vijayanagara Empire, so many people ruled. But the history of the Dharmic kings were actually not presented in the way it deserved to be presented. And the invaders were presented as a good, noble people. And because of that, and the history is written in such a way, because of that, the Indians, they don't want to identify themselves with the India. If you talk to many of the young generation, many young people in the current times, many times they get influenced with the leftist ideology. They don't want to identify themselves with the India. So that's one of the reasons is that they don't know the true history of India. So it's not simply in a nationalistic sense or something, because India is not simply, it is a dharmic place, Bharat Varsha. Therefore, knowing because Bhaktivinoda Thakur, this quote in Krishna Samhita is also very important. How he's telling how if the people of India discuss the history and time with reason and argument, they will be greatly benefited. So understanding our glorious past will help us to act responsibly. So therefore, all these names, they are just list of names, but at least it shows that how so many glorious kings ruled the Bharat Varsha. How the world was actually, the whole world was under the following the Vedic culture. We can see in that line. So from Indrasena came Vitihotra, from Vitihotra came Satyashrava. Satyashrava came the son named Urushrava, from Urushrava came Devadatta. From Devadatta, a son named Agniveshya came, who was the fire god Agni. And this son, who was a celebrated saint, was well known as Kanina and Jatukarnya. From Agniveshya came a Brahminical dynasty known as Agniveshyayana. And now that I have described the descendants of Narishyanta, let me describe the descendants of Dishta. Please hear from me. And Dishta had a son named Nabaga. This Nabaga is different from the Nabaga who will be described later. This Nabaga became a Vaishya by occupational duty. The son of Nabaga was known as Balandana. The son of Balandana was Vatsapriti, and his son was Pramshu. Pramshu's son was Pramati, and Pramati's son was Kanitra. Kanitra's son was Chakshusha, and his son was Vivimshati. Vivimshati's son is Ramba, whose son was a great religious king. Kaninetra's son was Karandama. Karandana came from him, son named Avikshit. From Avikshit came Marutha. So this Marutha performed such glorious sacrifices. In the first canto, there is a mention. He performed so much of sacrifice, and he would give so much of gold and charity to the Brahmanas. And the Brahmanas, they would accept whatever is required for them, and they would leave the remaining thing. And the many of the golden vessels which were utilized in that Vedic sacrifice, they were also left like that. And the citizens were also not taking those golden vessels and the golden properties left by the Brahmanas. So Krishna tells to Yudhishthira Maharaj, you want to perform the Ashwamedha Yajna, you go to the northern direction, there is a wealth which is left by the king Marutha, and you get that wealth, and with that wealth you perform this Ashwamedha Yajna. So what we can see is that how in the Marutha's kingdom, all the people were so satisfied, how they followed the Ishavasya principle. They did not they were not greedy for others' property. They did not try to enjoy the others' property. The vessels which were utilized in the sacrifice, they were just lying like that. Because people, they didn't actually loot that. They were satisfied with their own property. You can see the Ishavasya principle was followed. So in the sacrifice of Marutha, King Indra became intoxicated by drinking a large quantity of Somarasa. The Brahmanas received ample contributions, and therefore they were satisfied. For that sacrifice, the various demigods who control the winds offered foodstuffs, and the Vishwadevas were members of the assembly. Maruta's son was Dama, Dama's son was Rajyavardhana, Rajyavardhana's son was Sudruti, and his son was Nara. The son of Nara was Kevala, and his son was Dunduman, whose son was Vegavan. Vegavan's son was Buddha, and Buddha's son was Trinabindu, who became the king of this earth. And the best of the Apsaras, the highly qualified girl named Alambusha, accepted the similarly qualified Trinabindu as her husband. She gave birth to a few sons and a daughter known as Ilavila. After the great saint Vishrava, the master of mystic yoga, received absolute knowledge from his father, he begot in the womb of Ilavila the great celebrated son known as Kuvera, the giver of money. Trinabindu had 3 sons, Vishala, Shunyabandhu, and Dhumraketu. Among them, Vishala created a dynasty and constructed a palace called Vaishali. The son of Vishala was known as Hemachandra, his son was Dhumraksha, and his son was Samyama, and his sons were Devaja and Krishashva. The son of Krishashva was Somadatta, who performed Ashwamedha sacrifices and satisfied the Supreme Lord. By worshipping the Supreme Lord, he achieved the most exalted post, a residence on the planet to which great mystic yogis are elevated. The son of Somadatta was Sumati, whose son was Janamejaya, and all these kings appearing in the dynasty of Vishala properly maintained the celebrated position of King Trinabindu. So we are almost 126. So I'll stop here. Tomorrow we'll actually start the 3rd chapter. So anybody has any questions? Anybody wants to share anything?
I wanted to ask a question upon the paid pujaris. Like family priests were not given salary; they were like maintained by the family or given some charity. But we say that as soon as somebody takes a salary, he becomes a shudra. So what is, because the lot of culture of paid pujaris is coming in like ISKCON temples nowadays, and if you see situation, because if they don't pay, nobody is ready to come unless they have brahmacharis there. So how to see the system? Was it in the Vedic time also that if pujari is paid salary by the Vaishyas who maintain the temple, or how it is considered authentic according to Vedic time?
Definitely. See, again, one thing we have to understand that like we are, there are ideal principles which are mentioned in the Shastra. Like I can remember one verse which is quoted in Garuda Purana somewhere, just I read somewhere, which talks about how one should not worship the Lord by taking money, something like that. So definitely these principles are their ideal principle. One shouldn't taking money for worship or taking money for education. But at the same time, we have to be aware that we are in the current time, the Varnashram, and at that time, those principles were followed because there were people who were maintaining those pujaris. They were not given salary or paid this one, but the society was taking care of them. But in the current time, the Varnashram has collapsed to a significant extent. So we cannot simply criticize this paid pujaris, this thing. That's why many times so they have their family, children, and sometimes one thing we can say is sometimes temples, like sometimes people build big temples in order that they feel that if we build a temple, they can get money, and then they go into an endless loop actually. So rather, sometimes we should focus on preaching more and more, and that people increase more, and then let the people build the temple in due course of time. So So why the paid pujari? This thing is there because the reason is that we don't have manpower. But then we built big temples and then we don't have manpower. So instead of that, why not build a temple after making more devotees? Let us build temples in the hearts of the devotees. Let those temples increase, and then they will make the temple in due course, and then there will be more manpower. This thing. So that is also another reason for that. We have to go a little core deeper. But again, we also have to see, according to the Vedic system point of view, it is not the appropriate system, but it may be just like for a Brahmana, the occupation of a priest was allowed, but it was a lower occupation for a Brahmana. But then Kali Yuga is, many things are impure from the point of view of Varnashram, but so therefore we also have some things which are pure in Kali Yuga is the holy name and the Srimad Bhagavatam. So in the holy name and the Srimad Bhagavatam, as much as possible, at least we should leave the commercialized aspect. We should not interfere, allow the commercialization in that which is purely available in Kali Yuga, that is holy name and the Srimad Bhagavatam. Many other things, many times it may become commercialized, but holy name, Srimad Bhagavatam, deity worship, of course, is a Krishna deity. We should also try to involve commercialization involved in that. But at least the Kali Yuga, the core thing is holy name and the Srimad Bhagavatam. We should try to keep systems as far as possible, which we should try to maintain pure systems, at least in that, as far as possible.
Hare Krishna. Prabhuji, one generic question. This came into my mind yesterday when you started your discussion yesterday with the point that how a particular situation can be expressed by different people in different perspective. You're giving an example that there is an event, a sound system engineer will describe that event in that manner. So that time the question came into my mind, but I couldn't clarify yesterday. The question is, Srimad Bhagavatam, we see there are multiple level of conversation. Ultimately, the author of Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vyasadeva, Srila Vyasadeva, it is described that he attracted his son Sukadeva Goswami by asking his disciples to, recite Srimad Bhagavatam verses, and then later on, Srila Vyasadeva himself narrated the whole Srimad Bhagavatam to Sukadeva Goswami. Then Sukadeva Goswami himself narrated the whole Bhagavatam to Parikshit Maharaj. Why Vyasadeva had to address or write it in a way of third recitation, where Suta Goswami is speaking to the sages of Naimisharanya? Why weren't the direct discussion of Sukadeva Goswami or Parikshit Maharaj, or else his own discussion directly with Sukadeva Goswami, why wasn't that taken in that way?
Why did Shukadeva Goswami write in the form of the
No, Srila Vyasadeva, why did he could have taken his whatever he had discussed with Sukadeva Goswami, or else he could have taken the discussion that happened between Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami as the first level of conversation, but that became a second level of conversation, and Suta Goswami and Naimisharanya sage's conversation became the first level of conversation, from where it begins. So I'm kind of a little curious if, in case there is any clue about it, why it is like that. Similarly, if you look at Mahabharata also starts like that. Vaishampayana, Vaishampayana Vacha. So, again, there Vyasadeva is quoting the conversation which happened at the end of the sacrifice, which Janmajaya was doing, and then that sacrifice was stopped. And then again, so why it had to be in this manner?
So I don't know the exact answer. I'll try to say something. So sometimes it is this point is raised in one purport. Some echo is coming. The second canto, first chapter, this point is raised. Some people say that because Shukadeva Goswami started speaking to Parikshit Maharaj in the second canto, first chapter, and then Shukadeva Goswami ended speaking to Parikshit Maharaj in the 12th canto, 5th chapter. Some people say that Bhagavatam actually starts in the second canto and it ends in 12th canto, 5th chapter. So they say that first canto is not a part of the Bhagavatam, and the last 8 chapters in the 12th canto are not part of the Bhagavatam. Some people say like that. But Jiva Goswami gives that answer. Prabhupada also quotes, I think, the purport. They say that actually Bhagavatam starting from 1.1.1 and it goes all the way up to 12.13.23, whichever number. So, so that means even the Suta Goswami's questions, they were part of the original Bhagavatam. The sages are asking Suta Goswami to ask, they are asking 6 questions. And then Suta Goswami narrated Srimad Bhagavatam to them. Shukdev Goswami narrated Bhagavatam to them. Maitreya Rishi narrated. They all narrated, but they are also part of the Bhagavatam. In fact, one thing we find in all the Puranas, whether Mahabharata or all the Puranas, they always have this style of actually conversation, question and answer. That seems to be because that is one of the core nature of the scriptures in the Sanatana Dharma. There is a samvad is there, question and answer. Repeated questions and answers are there. So, and also there is a multiple loops of conversation. Suta Goswami, the sages, Shukdev Goswami, Parishit Maharaj, Maitreya Rishi, Vidura. This also shows that the parampara system of the same knowledge is repeated by other people to some other audience. That is also another, that could also be another reason for this. But why it is in this particular form, in some other reason, if it's somebody is there, I'm not aware. But this is what I can think of. But Vyasadeva wrote the Bhagavatam starting from the first verse, because, for example, in the Mahamuni Krute, that verse comes, the second verse. So one may wonder, like, is this verse written by Vyasadeva or somebody else? Why Vyasadeva is writing about himself? Maybe this verse is not part of the Bhagavatam, like that some people say. But the Acharyas very clearly mentioned that Bhagavatam starts from the 1.1.1. Vyasadeva starting from first verse until the last verse, the 12th canto. And this conversation within conversation, that seems to be the one of the standard method or a pattern which we see in the different scriptures in Sanatana Dharma, because it's always in the form of the questions and answers. Otherwise, we could have they could have written a book in the form of, okay, this is topic 1, topic 2, topic 3. So like that, they could have written only directly the points. So a topic on creation, this happened, topic on annihilation. So it could have been written like that, but then it would not be very interesting actually. When it is in the form of the conversation, when the same topics are discussed in the form of the conversation, somebody is asking a question and then or some other person is answering it, or sometimes the speaker understands what is going on in the mind of the audience and then he starts a new topic. So by that, we see the emotions are involved between the speaker and hearer, and there is the we can see the submission of the speaker and the hearer. So that because that is the natural process of learning the Vedic knowledge, so therefore it is always in the form of the conversation, conversation within the conversation, because these things illustrate the principle of Guru Sishya Parampara. These things illustrate the principle of Parampara, repeating what we have heard from one conversation to another audience. This can be the reasons why it is like that actually.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. If I can just quickly ask one last question on this. We generally say there are 18,000 shlokas in Srimad Bhagavatam.
Hmm.
But I recently came across where a question was put forward where it said there are only 15,500 approximately verses.
Hmm.
Can you please share some light on this?
There is an explanation given for that. It depends on how you count actually. We will have to locate somewhere, but there are many verses in the fifth canto. They are in the prose format. So when you count the verses based on the chanda, based on the particular say form of a chanda, that means when a particular chanda, you can actually the shloka will have certain number of syllables. So when you fix a certain number of syllables and count that as one shloka, and by that when you count in that pattern, then the total would come to 18,000. So that is the explanation given. Maybe I will locate it and I will send it, share it tomorrow.
Thank you. Thank you, Prabhuji.
Okay, I think it's 140. Devotees can go
Thank you,
for
sir.
prasadam, and we'll carry forward whatever next tomorrow. ग्रंथरा श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय, श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय, गौर भक्त वृंद की जय. Thank you very much for your patient attention. Hare Krishna.
क्या मैसेज डाल दो. अभी समर्पण गुप्त